can see on the first slide, this is week, actually 5.5, but as I said, we're one class ahead, so whether that will leave us still with one extra class where we don't have anything planned, before the midterm exam, that is. I'll think of a way to fill the time that we have, okay? Whether it's documentary, whatever the case may be, okay? So, today's topic is gender inequality. Of course, I'll be talking about gender inequality from a more general perspective, but the focus is definitely on Korea, right? So this is a more full title, or fancy title, if you want to call it. Gender Inequality in Korea, Facts, Causes, and Implications. But before I begin, especially for exchange students, what is your impression of gender situation or the characteristic of gender inequality? Is this something that you have observed? That there is something happening where Korean women are, let's say, more discriminated than, let's say, women in the US? Have you ever observed anything like that, or have you read anything on the nature of gender inequality in Korea? Anything that sort of stands out as being unique, different? Yes? What is high? Oh, salary. Okay, well, that's definitely true. So, as a whole, women do receive less than men, and I mean, that's universal. But as with many things I say about Korea, it's not the differences of kind, but differences of degree, okay? So it's worse, much worse in Korea than, let's say, Europe or North America, okay? Thank you. Anyone else? Anything else about the nature of gender inequality in Korea? Okay. Well, this is what I have in store for you. Lecture outline. Introduction. It'll be rather a long introduction today. Okay, I want to sort of take you through the history of the gender inequality, not necessarily about Korea, but as a whole, how women, from a global perspective, have come a long way, okay, compared to how it used to be. And of course, there are still many, many obstacles to overcome to fully enjoy gender equality, okay? I'll tell you about the forecast, like the number of years it'll take, given the current trends, how long it'll take for humanity to fully realize gender equality, okay? And it's definitely more than 100 years, okay? Again, that's the forecast. Anyway, after the long introduction, we'll talk about the difference between sex and gender, and third, measuring gender inequality. As you may have seen, there are many organizations that put out how countries rank in terms of gender inequality. And I want you to sort of think about or know what they measure to come to their ranking, okay? And most importantly, the last two would be the real focus of this week's lectures on gender inequality, and that is, how do women in Korea fare compared to men? Okay, how are Korean women discriminated? And in certain cases, I'll be able to provide some comparisons. Okay, and out of the and the most important would be the explaining gender inequality in Korea. So why is gender inequality in Korea so bad? Again, the ranking will show you that the Korea's performance when it comes to gender equality has not been good. Okay, so we'll try to explain why that is the case. Okay. All right. This is a little story from a case, like a reported case from the United States, and just by sharing this news story, you'll see that even in an economically advanced nation such as the United States, women had to fight for their rights. Okay? Okay, this is from 1967, just barely a half century ago, right? On April 19th, 1967, 20-year-old Catherine Switzer was running the Boston Marathon when a truck carrying photographers and race officials drove by slowly. One of the officials was stunned when he noticed Switzer jumping off the vehicle and yelling, "Get the hell out of my race." Sample lunged at the young runner and tried to rip off her official race number. He missed the number but grabbed the back of Switzer's sweatshirt, momentarily preventing her from advancing. Switzer's boyfriend was able to help her get away, and Switzer was able to escape and finish the race. What had Switzer done to evoke such an angry outburst? See, she had dared to run a marathon at a time when women were banned from competing in marathons. Is this something that you are aware of? That as late as about a half a century ago, women were banned internationally, not just in the United States, were banned from running in marathons. Anyway, so, well, I already mentioned it, right? So the dominant idea held by men was that women were simply too frail to complete the grueling 42.19 kilometers event safely. Okay? Conventional wisdom held that even if some women could finish the race, doing so would likely cause physiological damage, perhaps even preventing them from having children. So women could not officially compete in U.S. marathons until 1971. So it took the U.S. another 4 years before finally and officially allowing women to compete in marathons in 1971. And the Olympics took much longer to make that happen. Olympic marathon did not allow women to compete until 1984. So, countless number of women today all over the world run in marathons each year. Their safe participation shows that what was widely considered biological reality just a few decades ago was a social construction. Can you write this down? Social construction of reality. Social construction of reality. And I think this is a very important concept for you to grasp so that you have a better understanding of how society works and how your knowledge is not really not necessarily a reflection of reality, but an interpretation. You see, whatever reality that we face, things we witness, things we experience, there's nothing inherent as being real. Much of what we know are socially constructed, especially by those in power. Now, who said that women were too weak to run in marathons? Was it women? Well, if some women did, it was a simple understanding that was socially constructed by those in power, which happen to be men, right? So I'm just giving you a very brief explanation as to what social construction of reality is, but it is something I hope you could look up to have a better grasp of what the concept is. And I'll get back to the social construction a little bit later. Of course, it was not just the marathons which discriminated against women in the past. In practically every sphere of society, women were consistently considered to be inferior to men, and their role in society was largely confined to traditional gender roles, which forced them to remain in the domestic or private sphere of society. From a global perspective, women today still face an array of daunting social problems, including dire poverty, severe lack of rights in many cultures and nations, forced marriage, rape and other violence, enslavement in sex industries, societal failure to recognize and develop their full human potential. And globally, women are also beset by hunger and violence far more than are men. So, the list is not exhaustive, but they're all based on facts, okay? For example, poverty is found to affect women more than men, okay? And forced marriage, have you heard of men being forced to marry? Well, it may happen occasionally, but many more women than men would be subjected to forced marriage, right? And enslavement in sex industries is something solely happening to women, right? So all of these are, again, based on facts, and they are worse in impoverished nations, okay? And it happens that this subordination of women to men is often legitimized by the dominant religion of a given society, okay? I won't name any specific country, but a typically a poor country usually has one dominant religion, and it typically happens to legitimize the dominance of men. Okay? And again, I won't get into specific names of countries and so on. At the same time, there are many positive indicators of the improving status of women throughout the world. For example, rates of literacy are increasing among women. More women are gaining political rights in more nations. There is an increasingly active global array of women's organizations working to achieve the rights and empowerment of women. And women's suffrage, the right to vote, is guaranteed in most countries. But if you look at this particular map, the numbers you see are the years in which the right to vote were granted to women. Okay? And it's not on the map here, but the latest country to grant voting rights to women is actually Saudi Arabia. And it happened in 2015. Okay? So you can see how, all over the world, you can see the pace of how women are gaining their rights to vote, or their status, the pace of the improved women's status is different from region to region and country to country. So, from this preliminary and brief survey, what we can safely conclude is that despite massive political changes and economic progress in countries throughout the world, sex discrimination and stereotyping continue to limit the opportunities of women. Even where women have made important strides in politics and the professions, women's overall progress remains uneven. Well, how about Korea? I said, you know, Korea is no exception, but maybe it doesn't really say much. But what we can say is this, that Korea manifests itself as a very male-dominant society, okay? And just by saying that, you know, what do you learn? So a statement like that has to be substantiated with data, okay? And I'll be showing you under section 4, okay? How women in Korea lag behind men in practically every aspect of society, okay? The question is, it's sort of a repetition, I guess. In what ways are women in Korean society discriminated? What are the cultural and social factors which account for the relatively more severe gender inequality in Korea? And based on these questions, we will review the various forms of gender inequality that exist in Korean society and explore the possible reasons for the persistence of gender discrimination in Korea. So if we had essay-type questions for the exams, you know, this one would be an excellent candidate, right, for the midterm exam. All right, let's talk a little bit about the difference between sex and gender, okay? My first real question, and if you know the answer, don't answer it, because it'll spoil the fun, okay? This question applies only to those who haven't encountered this question before. Anyone? Yes? Roots. You know, that's an excellent answer, right? But it's not the answer I'm looking for. What else? Well, to this question, we get answers like, you know, roots, branches, leaves, and so on, right? But the correct answer is, if man is a tree, woman is also a tree. As you'd agree, right? You see, from early on, you've been socialized to think that women and men are different. Okay? Yes, they are different. Okay? But maybe subliminally and unconsciously, you may have thought of women and men being different, but you always attach certain qualities, right? And which gender, if you were, I mean, you would agree that you know, the two genders cannot be fully equal, right? And maybe it's a possibility that we have this idea that men are somewhat, you know, better. You know, if it's for men is a complete, you know, being, tree. Women is only part of this whole thing, tree, right? Anyway, another interesting thing to, here's an old riddle. This is a very, very famous story used in many discussions about gender inequality. And if you again, same thing with the first question. If you have read this before, please abstain from giving your answer, okay? So this only applies to those who are reading it for the first time, okay? Here is a riddle. A father and his son are in a car accident. The father dies at the scene and the son is rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, the surgeon looks at the boy and says, quote, "I can't operate on this boy. He is my son. How can this be?" If you see for too long, you will sort of get the answer. Yes? Very good. It's the mother. You know, I'm sure many of you couldn't really get this, right? You were like puzzled. How could this be? But it's the mother who happens to be the surgeon. But this famous story tells you how you are socialized to think of certain professions as being male dominant. Okay? And one of them is surgeon. Okay? So I hope you could use this story to remind others how we, whether we like it or not, we hold this very sort of strong stereotypes about different genders. Well, we're going to have some fun doing this. Imagine suddenly becoming a member of the other sex. Is something that have you ever thought about this? To help you with this exercise, here is a traditional gender stereotypes. Okay? Again, traditional, keep that in mind. Okay? And stereotypes, what is the unique truth about stereotype? The unique truth and characteristic of stereotype is that every stereotype is wrong. Every stereotype always contains partial truth, but it is never a full truth. For example, is the following stereotype correct? Koreans eat dog meat. Well, the underlying assumption of that statement is that every Korean eats dog meat. Okay? So, again, you know how we also hear about Asians being good in math? That's total BS. Look at me. I've never been good in math. I don't know how I made it through university, actually, because I had to finish at least one math to get a BA. But anyway, there's another classic example of a stereotype, right? Asians or Koreans being good at math again. So, again, so keep that in mind, stereotype. Every stereotype is incorrect. It's false, okay? Anyway, I don't know, I don't want to point a finger at anyone and ask what the student thought is. Any woman, if you were to have to change to the opposite sex, what do you think you'll have to change first? Is this a stupid question? Any male student? Yes. Whatever. Everything about the opposite sex? Okay. Again, that's why I asked whether this was a sort of a stupid question, but anyway, I want to drag this down. All right, I don't know if this exercise is fun to do, but I think it's sort of a nice reminder as to what it is like to be a member of the opposite sex. But what I show you in the following few slides is, you know, how being a male, for example, what as men, for example, what they face, how they're different from women. In the case of women, what kinds of problems they face in society. Okay, and anyway, let's see what I have. First, you likely change your name because a name often identifies a person's gender. Of course, there are some exceptions, but anyway. Second, you probably change your appearance, right? Third, you would also have to change some of your interpersonal behavior. And again, these are based on studies. So men talk more often, talk more than women. I don't know if you knew this, but again, this is based on many studies observing people's interactions. Okay, men talk more than women, okay, and they are louder, and I think that's quite easy to understand, right? And in their behavior, they're more assertive and more controlling. Okay, and women are more likely to laugh, especially you've heard of a nervous laugh, right? And also, they're more likely to express hesitance and more likely to be polite. Fourth, gender differences also appear in nonverbal communication. Women use less personal space, touch less in impersonal settings, but are touched more. They smile more, even when they're not necessarily happy. Generally, women are also more attuned to nonverbal cues than men. So if you became a woman, you might have to become more attentive. This, in the case of men becoming women. Finally, you might have to change many of your attitudes because men and women differ significantly on many, if not most, social and political issues. I mean, I just got the list of 5 from a list of 20, but I think it'll be something to think about or look up. How men and women are different in social settings, psychologically, social psychologically, and so on. And what are the benefits and cost of switching to the other sex? And this is sort of a related question. Okay, so under this particular question, certain characteristics associated with each gender are provided. Okay. So if you're a woman and become a man, your income would likely to increase significantly, again, based on facts. You would have more power in virtually every social setting. Third, you would be far more likely to head a major corporation, run your own business, or be elected to a political office. Universally true. As a man, you'd be far more likely to die a violent death and would probably not live as long. And another universal fact, as you know, women outlive men, okay? by anywhere between 4 to 10 years. Okay? But on average, about 5-6 years. Men are also more likely to be imprisoned than are women. If you're a man who becomes a woman, your income would likely to drop. Women are reportedly less happy than men about things such as the amount of money available to live on, the amount of help they get from their mates around the house, how childcare is shared, and how they look. Again, this is based on studies, because women are more concerned with their looks than men. Generally, they're less happy than men about their looks. Okay? Women also report being more fearful on the streets than men. However, women are more satisfied than men with their roles as parents and with their friendships outside marriage. Fifth, women are also more tolerant than men on a range of social and political attitudes. So, I hope you take this opportunity. I've sort of gave you a heads up on how there are so many of these studies which compare and contrast how women and men are different, not only psychologically, but also according to many social indicators, right? So I hope you could look these up, at least for fun, okay? So as you can see in this experiment, for both women and men, there are benefits, costs, and consequences stemming from the social definitions associated with gender. Anyway, as it is well known, biology differentiates the sexes, but it is society that differentiates male and female roles. Nature determines whether you are male or female, but it is society that gives significance to this distinction. So we're back to social construction, okay? You see, again, being a man or being a woman, there's nothing inherent. If you were not socialized, if society did not attach all these roles, expectations, and characteristics to each gender, you'd be neutral. You would not have these stereotypes, okay? So that's where social construction comes in. Everything about society, there's nothing, again, inherently true or inherently, whatever characteristics we sort of come to attach to any particular entity, they are social constructions. Okay? I hope that's enough for now, but please look up social construction. So the social construction of gender means that there is nothing inherent in our identity and behavior as men and women, and that who we become as men and women is largely shaped by cultural and social expectations as well as socialization. According to this socially created division, women and men have different identities and social roles. Men and women are expected to think and act in certain ways across most life domains. Gender also serves as a social status. In almost all societies, every society treats women and men differently. And as insinuated earlier, men and women are not only different, but also unequal in terms of power, prestige, and wealth. And gender roles ascribed to men and women vary greatly from culture to culture. Wow, I think perhaps I spent too much money with this introduction, okay? But now we're getting into more nitty-gritty stuff about gender inequality. Anyway, so how do you measure gender inequality? Anyone with a thought? What do you think? As I mentioned, there are many organizations that not only look at the nature of gender inequality domestically, but there are many organizations that actually do international comparisons. Now, in order to measure the degree or the nature of gender inequality in any given society, what do you think they look at? Yes? Okay. So, thank you. And if you were to just, without like explanations, just in keywords, you mentioned education, crime, and was it poverty or income? Okay. And that was the first one, right? Yes. So, I think she mentioned all the relevant ones, but at least if I just stick with the ones that I'll be talking about, one thing they definitely look at is education. Okay, so women's access to not only elementary and secondary education, but also college education. So that's one very important indicator. Okay, what else? Anyone? Yes. Hmm? Economic participation? Yes. So hiring. Okay, so, well, I think all the ones are, of course, relevant, but whether these organizations or the indexes that I'll be talking about actually include those, we'll see, okay? So anyway, here we go. In measuring gender disparity of a given country and for international comparisons, indexes by 3 institutions are widely used. Okay? First is Gender Inequality Index by the UN. Okay? Second, the Global Gender Gap Index by the World Economic Forum. And I'm sure you've heard of World Economic Forum, right? Third, the Glass Ceiling Index by the esteemed British magazine called The Economist. Again, it's widely referred to by the mass media all over the world. Okay? Wow, I'm just giving a question away. This would be a perfect multiple choice question, right? It would be like, which one is not listed as a... No, never mind. Anyway, the first one, the Gender Inequality Index by the United Nations Development Program, measures gender inequality in 3 aspects. Let's see what they are. First, reproductive health. So they look at maternal mortality rate or mortality ratio. Okay? So I mean, I'll leave it to your imagination as to why they look at this. Okay. Second, empowerment. It's a sort of a keyword that the UNDP uses. So they look at things like proportion of women in politics, or the proportion of lawmakers. Okay, and the second element is the proportion of females obtaining at least some secondary education. Third aspect is the economic status, and this is where they look at the labor force participation rate of females. So the lower the economic participation on the part of women, lower the ranking. Okay? So I mean, it's quite clear, right, as to what the low ranking would indicate. Okay? The one by the WEF is slightly different, but it looks at four things, four dimensions. Okay? Some overlap. Okay? First, economic or participation and opportunity. Education attainment, and this one they look at women's access to college education, okay? Whereas the first one looked at women's access to secondary education and above, okay? Third, health and survival measures access to health care. And as you can see, the political empowerment, I think, is in practically every index. Okay? And that is, again, proportion of women in parliament and in ministerial positions. And we'll talk about this later. Is having a large number of women in the parliament a necessary condition for realizing more full gender equality? What's more important? Class inequality or gender inequality when it comes to improving women's status in any given society? Anyway, as you can see, the last point says, I'll be showing you the findings by the WEF later, and when it comes to the inequality that exists for economic participation, education attainment, health, political empowerment, this is the sub-index where the widest gap exists between males and females. Okay? So here we go. And I really found this very interesting because I thought, at least when it comes to tertiary education, women's access to college education was, I thought, much lower than what I saw here. Okay? And I think this will also be very new to you, right? Too. Okay? So again, this is from the Global Gender Gap Index Report 2020. When it comes to education gap, there's almost none, right? There's no real gap. When it comes to primary education, okay? When it comes to secondary education, it's the same. This is the global index, okay? When it comes to college education, women actually, their enrollment rate is higher than that of males, okay? Globally speaking, okay? And this is Korea's rank. According to this 2020 report, can you believe this? Korea's rank was 108th out of 153 countries. Okay? You know, there are close to 200 countries, including territories. and I would say about 50 countries with like a million population each. So I think all the countries that with sizable population, at least with a population of over 5 million, were subjected to this evaluation, and Korea was ranked 108th. And the rank for each sub-index is there. Okay, Korea's rank for economic participation and opportunity was 127th, education and attainment 101th, health and survival first, political empowerment in 79th. So what I find interesting is this: why is educational attainment sub-index Korea's rank so low? Okay, it's something I really have to look into. Okay, but anyway, that's Korea's rank. Okay, the third index I'll be talking about is the glass ceiling index by The Economist, and it measures the environment for working women, combining data on the following aspects: access to higher education, labor force participation, gender pay gap, childcare costs, maternity and paternity rights, and representation in senior positions. So because their focus is on the environment, working environment for women, there is nothing about political empowerment, right? But instead, there is this new element, and that is representation of women in senior positions. Okay. Any questions up to this point about the gender equality index? Yes. So, at least for the midterm exam, I hope you could get a sense of, what indexes are being looked at, okay, commonly, okay? At least between the first two, okay? So at least after today's class, I hope you have a better sense of, again, we talk about gender inequality quite often, right? And we talk about gender inequality of this country, that country, but you really should know what they look at, okay? What indicators they look at to come to that particular conclusion, okay? So, all right, let's move on. So this is a glass ceiling index from 2019, quite recent. And guess where Korea is? Ranked dead last, okay? At least for the countries that were indexed, okay? For 2019 or the latest. So, again, this particular index looked at all these, okay? So I can tell you right away where Korea did poorly, okay? Labor force participation, Korea doesn't perform well. Gender pay gap is one of the worst among the OECD countries. And while maternity and paternity right, Korea is quite good. But this is where Korea does the worst. Okay? That's why Korea is ranked so low. Similar to countries like Japan and Turkey. Okay? You may have noticed how when I show international data for comparison, you may have noticed I often refer to OECD, right? I don't know if the media in your country often mention OECD. It does? Well, in Korea, it's almost on a daily basis. Well, for your information, OECD is so-called rich country club. Okay, so it includes every rich country and more. Okay, and collectively, OECD countries account for more than 70% of all the world's GDP. Okay, so that's why I think when Korea was allowed to join this OECD, it was a big news that made many Koreans proud. Okay. Anyway, I think it's a good thing where we have something to compare ourselves to. Okay, like OECD average and how other OECD members do, and we try to emulate. We try to become a better society to live. So, all in all, according to the gender gap report released by this one, the graph I showed you was from 2020, okay? But more recent report by the WEF, and this report was released in 2022, last year. The global achievement rate of gender equality is only 68.1% out of 100. Don't ask me how they came to this particular number, but you get a sense, right? That, we still have a long way to go. We're at maybe C plus C, if you were thinking of letter grade, right? And the report predicts that it'll take 132 years for the global gender gap to disappear at current trends. And just looking at the indexes or sub-indexes that I talked about, yes, that to achieve gender parity of those indexes, it'll take 132 years. But a UN report has more grim forecast, okay? And it says that it'll take 286 years to remove all the discriminatory laws and to close prevailing gaps in legal protections for women and girls. So whether it's 132 or 286 years, what all of this shows is that we still have a long way to go to achieve gender equality. Yeah? Okay, now we turn to talking about the nature of gender inequality in Korea. And the first one is gender segregation in the labor force. Majority of working women in Korea are concentrated in the informal subcontracting sector, that is, firms employing less than 5, and in the low-paying service sector, okay, like restaurants or health services, right? You not only have, when I say health service, I'm talking about, if you go to a doctor's office, there's a health assistant, right? Nearly 2/3 of all part-time irregular workers are women in Korea. Korean women are particularly overrepresented in the following occupations, with their ratios hovering around 90%. First, clerical jobs, and we're talking about like secretaries. Health assessment and treatment, not only registered nurses, dietitians, but also physicians' assistants. Third, retail sales, food service and personal service, like hairdressers. Now, similar trends, so, you know, gender sort of concentration, women being overrepresented in these jobs is sort of universal, okay? They also happen in most other countries, if not every other country, but differences of degree do exist, okay? Here are some images I want to show you. So this is from the EU, okay? From 2018. 97% of builders at construction sites, men. Drivers and mobile plant operators, 96% men. Metal workers, 96% men. Science and engineering technicians, 83% men. And science and engineering professions, 74% men. But on the other hand, when it comes to personal carers, 89% comprised women in the EU, cleaners 84%, office clerks 80%, health technicians 78%, and teachers 71%. And this one is more global. Okay? This one looked at average of 144 countries analyzed by the World Economic Forum. So this is as global as you can get. Okay? So what color is this? Anyway, let's just use this one. This one, sky blue, it's male proportion. And this is for management positions. So you can see how when it comes to management positions, the proportion of males far sort of perform, okay? Women counterparts. And for total employees, you see the difference depending on the field of occupation, right? Men, on the other hand, maybe I should say Korean men, comprise a large majority of physicians, professors, dentists, lawyers, accountants, scientists, and other high-paying and prestigious professionals in Korea. Other professions with high male concentration include clergy, political figures, and military leaders, and I think Korea is no exception with regard to the last point. And look at this. And if you could share with me any data on your country, it would be highly appreciated. So this is sort of a comparison between 2010 and 2019. Okay? And the numbers you see are the proportion of women in these different professions. Okay? Professions which are highly regarded and highly desired in Korea. Physicians, proportion of women in 2010 was 22.6%, but the proportion jumped to 26.1% in 2019. Dentists, it made a jump from 25.3% in 2010 to 27.5%. And doctors of Asian medicine, 16.9% in 2010 and 22.3% in 2019. And when it comes to legal experts, in 2010, 15% comprised women, but the total made a major jump in 2019 to 28.7%. So it was almost double, right, from the 2010 figure. And professors, as of 2019, about 1 in every 4 professor in Korea is women. And again, with this, I don't have any international comparisons to share with you, but if you could find any data and if you could share that information with me, it'll be highly appreciated. Second aspect in which women are discriminated in Korea is in hiring. Okay? And this is where I don't know if similar things are happening in your country, but it is really bad. Okay? It's almost shocking that this is still happening. Okay? And here we go. Many feminists agree that the only way a woman can be liberated or can have hopes of achieving gender parity is through economic independence. Okay? Again, it's agreed that the first step to take, in a way, right, to realize gender equality is for women to have economic independence, to be working, okay, outside the home, to have a paid work. But this is proving to be very difficult in Korea. Okay? Remember the gender index where Korea performed poorly in economic participation? Well, some of it is because maybe some women do not want to work voluntarily. But a lot of women are not working because they are deprived of the opportunity to work because of discrimination in hiring. Okay? And I'll sort of talk about how that happens. Okay? Although the Equal Employment Opportunity legislation has been enacted since 1987, companies, including conglomerates like Hyundai, Samsung, you know, all the major conglomerates you're all are familiar with, and public corporations. Public corporations, as you know, are government-run. You know, these are companies that are run with our tax money. They also discriminate against women. Okay? And here are some data. Well, without you knowing the figure, maybe it's stupid for me to ask you this question, but I raised this question to have just to able to guess. Can anyone sort of just a ballpark figure? Yes, 35%. I think that's a very good guess, right? Would that be something that's like similar in your country? Well, if it's the U.S., I'm sure it's higher than 35%. Anyway, her comment of 30 or answer of 35%, it's a very, very good guess because it's close to the real answer anyway. Here we go. I couldn't find any more updated data on this, okay? But a 2015 survey showed that women comprised only 23.4%. So that's not even 1/4 of all new recruits of 500 top grossing stock listed companies. See, you know, if you say 500 top grossing stock listed companies, you're talking about practically every major company in Korea included on the list, okay? And when they did this survey, not even 1/4 of all the new recruits happened to be women. And I'm sort of jumping ahead, but from about 10 years ago, we have more women graduates from universities. And yet, only 1/4 end up getting a job at a sizable company. Okay? Also, in 2013, women made up only 22.7% of all new recruits at top 30 publicly owned corporations. This one sort of jumped at you, right? With, for example, what for example? But anyway, this one is a more recent survey, and it shows you that, you know, this practice of discrimination against women in hiring, you know, it's been accumulating over the years, right? So this one, whereas this one is looking at only the new recruits, this one, survey of 6, even more companies than this one, and it looked at gender breakdown of all the employees. And look how women must have faced discrimination. How do you get this proportion? Is it because women they do not want to work? Do they just go to universities so that they don't work? So this is a clear sign of women being discriminated in hiring by not only, you know, Korean companies, but also publicly owned corporations. Okay? And when it comes to discrimination against hiring of women, the largest conglomerates, they are worse, as you can see in this particular survey done in 2015. Okay? So this is not new recruits, but all the employees, okay, at 96 stock listed companies belonging to the top 10 conglomerates in 2015. And this is the ratio of male-female workers at top 10 chaebol as of 2015. Again, I tried very hard to find more updated figure, but I'm sure even if I found something from 2022, the figures would not be that different because nothing really changed in how companies do business when it comes to hiring. Okay? So Samsung ratio of female, ratio of all the workers here, okay? Women, 24.3%. Hyundai Motors, you know, the makers of Genesis and other Hyundai motor vehicles, only 4.4%. I'm sure you're not sort of familiar with this, but 32.5%. LG, 20.1. So the conglomerate with the highest proportion of female workers, Lotte. And if I were to just give you an explanation as to why that is the case, they are in service business, like recreational park, hotels, restaurants, and so on, okay? And coffee shops. And discrimination against women in hiring is one of the key reasons for the fact that only 64.6% of Korean women with college degrees in 2013 work outside the home. So I'm referring to this 2013 data because this is the only one that I could find which actually makes comparison between Korea and the OECD average. So if we go with the OECD average, let's say USA has an OECD average. So in the US, 52% of women with college degrees are working, okay? But in Korea, it's less than 2/3 of women with college degree who are working outside the home, okay? So again, is it because women are lazy in Korea? And again, the answer is that they are being denied a chance to participate in economy, okay? So of the economically advanced nations, I think Korea has one of the lowest economic participation rate of women, as you can see here. Only 53% of women between the age of 15 to 65 work outside the home, okay? And I think that's without, maybe I should find some OECD data here, okay? But anyway, you can just sense, right, that it's not that high, right? And again, you cannot really blame Korean women, because if they are being discriminated, you know, the blame goes to the companies, okay? And all of this is disturbing because for the first time ever in 2010, the number of female college graduates surpassed that of males. Since 2009, moreover, more females move on to college education than males. And here we go. So in 2009, more women enrolled in colleges than males for the first time ever in Korean history, okay? And the trend has continued. And so all of this means that more females graduate from universities. And yet, when they try to enter the labor market, they are discriminated, okay? All right. So I'll stop here and continue on with all the indicators which show that women are being discriminated in Korea. Maybe in the beginning I'll talk about how women in Korea are discriminated when in hiring. Okay? So thank you.